Hi, this is Jud Burgess, and what I am presenting to you here is a point-by-point breakdown of what Mayor Margo said when he was interviewed by ABC 7 News Extra. And I mean, you talk about putting El Pasoans on full-blown spin cycle. I mean, I'm so dizzy right now because of the way he has just spun us around and the way he continues with these faulty talking points and these half-truths and these complete outright lies. But anyway, we're going to go over this point by point, and he's going to have his say, and then I'm going to come back and refute what he's saying and kind of give it to you the way it really is. I'm going to tell you the truth about what's going on here with the Duranguito and the El Paso Sports Arena Fuster Club situation going on now for over 2 years.
Xtra. Joining us now is El Paso Mayor Dee Margo. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. As you well know, we had Mr. JP Bryan before on our previous segment. One of the very first questions I asked him is the one I'm going to ask you. He's been quoted as calling this debate over the Duranguito area the historical Alamo. Do you agree?
Well, I think that's a little much hyperbole, quite candidly. I know they also consider this area that they call Duranguito, that we call the Union Plaza, which I'm also told is the Union Plaza District is a more appropriate moniker, is that they're saying that was the first neighborhood in El Paso, and my understanding is Chihuahuita, from the historians I've talked to, was our first real neighborhood down there.
So there was really no debate over the first neighborhood is what you're saying?
No, I think the first neighborhood is Chihuahuita.
Got it.
When Mayor Dee Margo starts talking about the Union Plaza and starts saying that that's a more correct moniker, as he puts it, for Barrio Duranguito, make no mistake, what he's doing, and this is what a lot of people in downtown are doing, and they've been doing since the Glass Beach study was done, is they're trying to what I call culturally cleanse the area, de-Mexicanize it, as has been put before also by other people, because he says it's not Barrio Duranguito. That's an incorrect term. He says that his historians, and when I say his historians, I think we all know who he's talking about. He's talking about Fred Morales, and Fred Morales is an amateur historian. He's a hobbyist. What he talks about is not anything that you can really put any stock in, because he's got no degree. He's got no actual standing in the historical community, but yet Mayor Dee Margo insists that he knows more than people like Yolanda Leyva, Max Grossman, David Romo. Okay, so he's saying that it should be called Union Plaza and not Duranguito, because Union Plaza is a more correct term for it. Not so. It is called Duranguito, and that's the oldest known reference to that area. Again, this is just a way to de-Mexicanize the area, make it sound more bland. That's not the case here. So the other thing he's doing is he's trying to say that Chihuahuita was the first neighborhood. That's a red herring. Okay, that's a deflection. That is just the only point he's trying to do here. The only reason he's using this whole line of thinking, or this line of argument, saying that Chihuahuita was first, is just to kind of throw the attention off the fact that this is the oldest platted neighborhood in El Paso, the birthplace of El Paso. When you start saying that Chihuahuita is the oldest one, then you're trying to say, like, well, that's a good reason to just completely blow up Barrio Duranguito. The fact is, it is the oldest one, and there's a lot of history there. There's probably a lot of artifacts under that ground that they don't want to look into. But yes, it is the oldest, and it doesn't matter one whit if Chihuahuita was first or second or Barrio Duranguito. All the historians and all the experts are saying that Barrio Duranguito is the first and oldest neighborhood in El Paso. So forget this whole thing that he's talking about, where it's Chihuahuita. Nonsense.
But you had several different places where you were considering placing this sports arena, i.e. entertainment center. One of those was behind the city council area, the bank buildings and hotels area, and then the Golden Shoe area. Why did you ultimately decide on building it here, or having it built here?
Well, the decision was before I became mayor, so I can't take. I had nothing to do with the actual selection, although the data I've looked at, it makes sense. I think the real driver was that there are some tax incentives from the state that allow us some sales tax rebates to use for development as long as you're within 1,000 foot of a convention center. I think it's just they call it a 312 program. So it made economic sense to take advantage of that. And after the 2012 bond election, which I'll remind your viewers that 72% of us voted for, they determined that out of the 4 sites they looked at, that was probably the most appropriate.
Right.
Another thing that he says, and this is something that he continues to lie about, and that is that 72% of the public voted for a sports arena in downtown, and so they just want to give us what we asked for. Okay, here's some very important things to think about, because that is a complete fabricated lie. Okay, it may have been 72% of the people who voted, but let's remember that only 30% of El Pasoans that are registered to vote actually voted on the bond issue. But that's not the big issue here. The big issue here is that, and I'm always going to bring this up, but Judge Meacham, a judge in Austin, was fully aware of the bait and switch that took place. Okay, forget the fact that some other judge flipped it over and said, like, no, we're going to go ahead and let the city have sports based on a Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of what entertainment is. Okay, that is why they overturned her decision. But her decision was based on actual facts that our previous city manager, Joyce Wilson, is on record and testified that they left out all that key language that mentioned sports or downtown or arena, because they were instructed, if you want to have a sports arena, don't mention it, because people will not vote for it. Nobody wants to spend the money on an expensive sports arena. Okay, so they left that language out. That made it a bait and switch. El Pasoans who did vote, the 72% that Margo's talking about, these are people that were fooled into thinking that it was going to be a fine arts center. It's going to have a lot to do with a lot of other things, and no sports were going to be involved. So you can't say that 72% of the public voted for a sports arena, because we didn't. We didn't know what it was. We figured it wasn't going to be in downtown. It was just going to be some large cultural center with dance, with musical concerts or whatever, but nothing having to do with sports. So let's just forget that, Margo. Just give it up, hang it up. We know you have friends in low places. We know that he somehow pulled in some favorites, most likely, and had another judge overturn Judge Meacham's decision. Wrong. And this is also very important. He was asked this question, and I want you to pay very close attention to this question. The question was, haven't you all studied various different locations within the downtown area? I'm telling you to pay close attention to that question too, because after watching him get interviewed, I picked up on something that nobody even knows about. And I'm going to bring this up a little bit later in this video. But he says, oh yeah, we checked about 4 different places and none of them were viable, and if we put the arena here in the Duranguito area, we can qualify for some kinds of incentives because it's within 1,000 feet of the Civic Center. Well, that's a lie in a sense, and you'll see why, because I'm going to come back to this later on in his interview. He said something about having offered JP Bryan the entire area for him to buy it out from the city, which it's just complete BS. Okay, I mean, they didn't offer him that land, and if they did, they probably said it's yours for $2 billion or something like that. But the thing that Mayor Margo said was that if JP Bryan was to buy that whole area from the city, then the city would look further south for the arena. What does that tell us? That tells us that there are probably areas south of Barrio Duranguito that they were thinking of putting it in, so that it's not a matter of it's gotta be in Barrio Duranguito. So that this is where he starts kind of like clouding the whole issue and starts making us wonder just how honest he's being with El Paso.
And in my discussions when JP and I were discussing possibly resolving or absolving the litigation, the city offered him, I think it was in April, the opportunity to come in and buy us out.
What happened then?
Well, we offered, as my recollection is, the specifics were that he could come in and buy the city out of that area. We would look for another area, I think a little further south. And also we said we would provide some incentives for development if that's truly what he wants to do. And he chose not to take advantage of that.
So, did you catch that? Mayor Margo just coming up with this absurd idea or absurd statement that somehow the city offered JP Bryan the entire Duranguito area and said, look, if you're so interested in historic preservation, we as a city will sell you the entire thing and we'll go looking for another place south of Paisano, I guess, for the arena. I mean, nobody's ever talked about that, and now all of a sudden here's Margo being interviewed and he comes up with this, I mean, this is absolutely incredulous. It's stunning. And so, where did that come from? Where did that come from?
Mr. JP Bryan was here actually Saturday, yesterday, and he brought a group out here of preservation groups, and he showed them a 3D video animation, which I want to show you right now, and want to get your take on that particular video. And you had a chance to actually see it before the program, but your opinion on that video and what their vision for what Duranguito ought to be. What's your opinion on that?
Well, during the Union Plaza area has been subject to deterioration by failure to take it, for over 30 years, and it's imperative that something be done down there. We want to preserve our history, but we want to do it in a proper way that enhances that neighborhood, doesn't detract from it. And right now, it's neglect. It's demolition by neglect, and nobody's made any. For over 30 years, there's been no interest in investing.
And so another thing that Margo likes to do a lot is he likes to bring up this age-old argument that everybody uses. And it's like, if it's historic, why didn't anybody do anything about it? Why wasn't people, investing in the area 30 years ago? That's all moot, okay? That makes no difference to what is going on today. Here's the fact. The fact is, preservationists, historians, people that are experts in this field have determined that. And the city determined that years ago because the city paid for several studies of that area in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And it was determined that there are several hundred buildings that could be historical in nature and could even receive historical status. So what matters is that we know that the history is there. And this is what JP Bryan was talking about in his interview, that the history is there, we need to do something now and to fight it. Margo, I believe Mayor Margo actually instructed Cassandra Brown and Henry Rivera to write an op-ed with El Paso's, the El Paso Times. Remember they had an op-ed talking about the fact that it's demolition by neglect, that the whole place is running down, so that gives the city the justification to just blow it up and put an arena there. Okay, that's faulty. That is completely disingenuous. It doesn't matter if it's falling apart. The thing is, what can we do to restore that area so that people will come far and wide to enjoy our heritage and to see the birthplace of El Paso and the confluence of 5 different cultures. As JP Bryan put it, the Native Americans, the Mexicans, the Spaniards, the Chinese, and the Anglos, all 5 of them joining within the El Paso area to create who we are today. So Mayor Margo just said that they want to preserve the history in a way that enhances that neighborhood. That's what we have already. We've already invested millions, with the firefighters park and several different things, lampposts and beautiful park areas. And now he's saying that he wants to preserve the history while enhancing the neighborhood. How is an arena going to do that? An arena will not enhance a neighborhood. It's going to obliterate the neighborhood. And it's going to create a wall that separates one half of downtown from the other half, or one portion of downtown from the other portion. So there is no way that their plans are going to enhance that neighborhood. It's going to eliminate the neighborhood, the culture, and the heritage of that neighborhood. And so The other important thing is, like, he was asked by the interviewer to what his opinion was on this incredible video that was produced that gives the vision of what Barrio Duranguito could be. I mean, it's a mixed-use neighborhood, and that's what the city is always talking about. We need mixed-use neighborhoods that are walkable, that you know, can have all sorts of thriving businesses. Barrio Duranguito is that to a T. Okay? An arena fuster cluck is going to get rid of that. And so he didn't even give his opinion. He has no interest in using that area and making something special and tapping into our heritage and our history there. So he just completely ignored the question and just went off on all these other things that really had nothing to do with the question. And so that's typical Margo. Just ignore, be ignorant about the whole entire thing, and just put out your own opinion about things without any respect to what was asked of them.
My next question is to you, since we've seen both visions. We've seen the vision that they proposed, which is just obviously revealed Saturday, and we've seen the one that you and I were talking about. Is there a way to incorporate both and find common ground?
Well, I think there's a way to incorporate our historical treasures and what makes El Paso special, our mountains, and all the things that we are. I went down to the inaugural for the President of Mexico a couple weeks ago, and I reminded people that the first location for El Paso was on the south side of the Rio Grande. Right. We're the largest bicultural, binational area in the world. And we need to take advantage of that in everything we're doing.
Is there a way to find common ground, however? Is there a way to incorporate both?
It would be a lot easier to have negotiations without litigation. I mean, it's already cost the city well over $1 million, and it's been very frustrating, although the last several announcements coming out of the courts have been to our benefit. We're winning battles, but the war hasn't been finalized. But it's hard to negotiate when you're in litigation.
And so here's another reason why we can rest assured that the city, Mayor Margo, all of City Council, all of our city leaders, to include our new city attorney, who's doing a great job filling the dirty shoes that Sylvia Burunda first left behind, and that city attorney is Carla Neiman. Here's how we can rest assured that they are not interested in working a compromise with JP Bryan, the preservationist, Paso del Sur, and all the people, all the El Pasons who have such a great vision for Barrio Duranguito. When it was time to replace Sylvia Burunda first, there were several people that were more qualified, some much more qualified than Carla Neiman. Guess who won? Despite the fact that they had a public board that recommended against Carla Neiman and for another woman, they went ahead and voted for Carla Neiman. And Mayor Margo himself said on camera that the reason they got her there is because she's a one-issue city attorney. And that issue is the El Paso Arena Fuster Club. She knows it, she's aware of the history, and so they basically took her, somebody that's lacking in the experience that these other candidates had, because she understands what's happening and she knows the loopholes, she knows the players involved. And so that's why she's sitting there as our city attorney, because Mayor Margo and city leaders want her to fight this battle on their behalf. And she's doing a great job of that. We've seen that already. So there's no real reason for them to want to look at the other people. They never show up on camera. They weren't there at this preservation forum. They all basically made a clear statement that they weren't interested in listening or seeing the vision for Duranguito from the rest of El Paso.
Which brings me to another question that I asked Mr. Bryan, which I want to ask you as well. Before this, you two were close friends, and he would stay over quite a bit, and he has contributed quite a bit to your campaign as well, to your wife's philanthropic endeavors.
Right.
Do you separate the personal from the philosophical? Are you still friends, or has this pretty much put a strain on your relationship?
Well, we haven't been pen pals lately, but otherwise, no, I have great respect for JP. His passion for Trost and his ability to articulate the value of the Trost architectural buildings, which we still are preserving, and the city's been involved in the preservation of the Martin Building, the Mills Building, and all these others that we're doing it.
Now the other thing that is, and I'm gonna put this out there, okay? You know, he was asked a question of if there's a strain on the relationship between JP Bryan, Dee, and Dee's wife, Adair. Now, I worked for Adair. I mean, she was a 20-year client. And, you know, I did a lot of great work for her and her Tomley Institute. And, you know, once I started calling Dee Margo out for his shenanigans at EPISD, all of the things that he's been doing and just these spectacular, dysfunctional and hurtful things to El Paso, I'll say it, he has. He's hurt El Paso, and people aren't really fully aware of just how much he has as a state representative, as a leader of EPISD board, and now as mayor. But Adair basically gave me an ultimatum. She said, you leave my husband alone or we're not going to do any work together. And I said, you know what? I'm not, some things are more important than money, and I need to stand up and continue calling him out. It's cost me. JP Bryan has always helped both of them. This is a man who contributed to Mayor Margo's campaign when he was running for state representative. And guess what? Mayor Margo always says, you know, you're an oil billionaire, you know, from Houston. He says he respects JP Bryan. He doesn't respect him one bit. All he respects is the money that JP Bryan represents to his campaigns and his walk up the political ladder. And with Adair, you know, JP Bryan gave over $250,000 of seed money to Adair so that she could start up her Tomley Institute. Without JP Bryan's help, the Tomley Institute would not exist today. I know because I work for her. And I know that that's where 95% of the money or 90% of the money was coming from his pocket. And so for this battle between them, and Adair has also, you know, been there trying to get, you know, him to go to the dark side, and he won't do it. So yeah, there's a lot of friction between the three of them because they have expectations of JP Bryan, and he refuses to compromise himself. I mean, he is for El Paso. We need to get behind him and Max and Paso del Sur and all the people that have been fighting this battle. And we need to get the word out there and just create coalitions and fight it. It's getting there.
The city's been doing everything we can to enhance our downtown.
Let's talk about the cost of the arena/entertainment center. It's gone up quite a bit than what was approved during the 2012 quality of bond. How much more do you anticipate it will cost, and your thoughts on just the rising cost?
Well, as your viewers have heard me say on numerous occasions, very few of the projects within the 2012 quality of life bond election, which I was in favor of, have come in on budget. The spray parks, the swimming pool, the West Side Natatorium was projected at $8 million. It cost something like $14 million to do it correctly. And I've said, you know, if you voted for it, we're going to do it correctly. But this was in there at $180 million. Incidentally, people were wanting to know about the cost of the properties. I think in the budget, which was there before I got there, was $21 million for the acquisition of the properties in the Union Plaza area, and I think we've only spent $12 million. So that's under budget. But to do a 15,000, maybe 18,000 arena, first class, probably is in the neighborhood of 250 million, and we approved 185, as I recall, for that. Now, I don't know that we're going to build to that full scale, but at the same time, now that the courts have allowed us to sell naming rights and those kinds of things, allow us to develop revenue streams.
Dee Margo states that this bond stated that the El Paso Arena multi-purpose entertainment center was slotted at $180 million. But now he's going out there and publicly telling everybody, as he just did, responding to that question of the increasing price tag, he says it's going to be at least 200 to 250 million. Well, forget the 200 million. It's going to be way more than that because it's already at 180 million. But it's going to be even more than 250 million. And why? Because they are going to try to make it world class. And so he's prepping us by, you know, telling everybody it's going to be a lot more. He said that they're going to try to use the naming rights as a way to bypass taking money out of taxpayers like you, me, and everybody else. Let's just say it was 250 million. That doesn't even include the maintenance every year, the employees that are going to run this thing. That doesn't include all the peripheral costs, like, you know, adjusting traffic patterns and all of the things that are going to happen, parking garages and all these associated costs. There's going to be plenty of them that they're not even talking about. But let's just say it goes to 250 million. That is 70 million over what we agreed on. That is a breach of contract because the city said, we'll give you this, you give us $180 million of your tax dollars and we'll provide for you this. Now Mayor Margo is telling everybody it's going to be $250 million, and that is frankly a breach of contract. And you know what? Carla Neiman knows this. Sylvia Buruna first knew this, and she said so herself, that these are contracts between the city and the people, the taxpayers, so you can't have it both ways. If this thing ends up costing us $250 million, which it will, and it's going to be a lot more than that, be ready to pay for this with our taxes via certificates of obligation. The city is well known to abuse these and use them as a way to get us on the hook for additional tens and tens of millions of tax dollars without our permission, without our participation, and without our vote. Okay? That's how they're going to do it. So this is abuse of power. It's an abuse of your citizenry. We're all being abused by the way they continue to tax us, just so that they can enhance their portfolio values of all the properties that they own. All the Borderplex Alliance, they own all this property up and down the El Paso Juarez corridor, and they want to see their portfolios explode, increase in value, while our taxes continue to go through the roof, whether it's through property taxes, whether it's through certificates of obligation, whether it's through, oh, we need this and we need that, so we're going to jack up your taxes once again. So we need to get together. It's going to take a while. It's going to take several election cycles before we get the kind of people that are going to fight for us. I know we had several people running against the incumbents, but there just isn't enough public awareness of just what's at stake here. So continue to get involved. Please continue to be aware of what is happening, and most of all, find ways to fight this. Don't just sit there and watch it on the news and complain and wring your hands and, you know, get on Facebook and rant. Get involved, join a coalition, give your money, and support what is happening so that we don't lose our history, we don't lose our heritage, our culture, and we don't lose our homes because we can't afford the taxes anymore. And we don't lose our kids to other cities. They're going to go. But let's try to make it a little harder for them to do it by creating a beautiful, wonderful El Paso based on our culture and our history and our heritage. Thank you.